We've all heard the promise. Gig work is freedom. Be your own boss, set your own schedule, work whenever and wherever you want. Apps show glossy ads of smiling drivers, delivery workers, and freelancers logging in on their terms. It's marketed as the future of work, a flexible alternative to the rigid 9-to-5. But here's the problem. The reality of gig work looks nothing like the promise. For millions of workers, flexibility is an illusion. Sure, you can log in when you want, but the moment you do, the app decides everything else. How much you earn, what jobs you're offered, and even whether you'll be punished for declining requests. Algorithms, not managers, dictate your livelihood. And unlike traditional jobs, there's no transparency, no real recourse, and no guaranteed paycheck at the end of the week. Gig companies thrive on this arrangement. By labeling workers as independent contractors, they avoid providing basic protections like minimum wage, overtime, or health benefits. That classification saves billions for the companies, but costs workers stability. If you get sick, there's no paid leave. If your car breaks down, you're on your own. If the algorithm glitches and locks you out, there's no HR to call. Your flexible job can vanish with no explanation or appeal. And the pay? It's often far less glamorous than advertised. While apps promote high hourly rates, those numbers don't include gas, vehicle wear and tear, insurance, or unpaid wait times. Many gig workers find themselves earning less than minimum wage once expenses are factored in. The promise of freedom quickly becomes the reality of exploitation, with workers footing the bill for the tools required to keep the system running. But here's where inequality enters the picture. Who ends up relying on gig work the most? It's not the wealthy who treat it as side cash. It's working class people, immigrants, and those locked out of stable employment opportunities. For them, gig work isn't extra income, it's survival. And when survival depends on an app's opaque rules, power tilts heavily against the worker. Social media adds another layer. Platforms glamorize the hustle, with influencer drivers showing off big paydays and flexible lifestyles. TikToks of gig workers counting cash or setting their own schedules rack up millions of views. But these stories often mask the reality for most workers: long hours, inconsistent pay, and financial precarity. What's presented as empowerment is, in many cases, a trap. Gig companies know this. They lean into the narrative of flexibility because it sells hope. Hope that you can escape the grind of traditional work. Hope that you can take control of your time. Hope that technology has created a fairer, freer economy. But hope becomes dangerous when it's used as cover for exploitation. The apps don't care whether workers thrive. They care whether workers stay logged in. And so, gig work reshapes inequality in modern life. It doesn't eliminate exploitation, it simply rebrands it. Instead of a boss breathing down your neck, you have an algorithm pushing you to accept just one more ride, one more order, one more gig. Instead of job security, you have flexibility. Instead of rights, you have ratings. And every step of the way, the worker carries the risk while the company reaps the reward. The deeper issue with gig work isn't just the lack of benefits or low pay. It's the way it reshapes what we consider normal. When millions of people are told that uncertainty is freedom, instability becomes an acceptable condition of work. And once that mindset spreads, it doesn't stay confined to ride-sharing or food delivery. It seeps into every corner of the economy and influences how other industries treat their workers. Employers outside the gig world take note. If app-based workers can be denied protections under the guise of flexibility, why not extend that logic to other jobs? We're already seeing it in industries like healthcare, teaching, and media, where temporary contracts, freelance positions, and per diem roles replace stable employment. The gig model has become a blueprint for squeezing more out of workers while giving less in return. This shift widens inequality. Workers with wealth or family support can take risks, experiment, and treat gig work as supplemental income. But workers without a safety net get trapped. They can't afford to log off, can't say no to bad offers, and can't take time off to recover. Flexibility for some becomes dependence for others, and the gap between those groups grows wider with every passing year. Social media once again amplifies the problem. The image of gig work as liberating dominates the online conversation, while stories of burnout and exploitation get buried. Platforms push content that glamorizes hustle culture because it keeps people engaged. And when struggling workers speak out, their voices rarely go viral. Inequality isn't just in the work. It's in the narrative that surrounds it and decides which stories we hear. The irony is that gig workers are essential to the same digital economy that undervalues them. Without drivers, couriers, and freelancers, the apps don't function. Yet the very people holding the system together are the ones most easily discarded. That imbalance highlights the truth. Power in the gig economy doesn't flow to the workers, it flows through them. To the platforms, the investors, and the corporations profiting off their labour. So what does this mean for the future of work? It means we have to ask harder questions. Is flexibility worth it if it comes at the cost of security? Is independence real if an algorithm decides your every move? Can we call it empowerment when so many workers are trapped in cycles of debt and exhaustion? Some argue that regulation can fix these issues. And in places where governments have stepped in, requiring minimum pay guarantees or forcing companies to recognize certain rights, conditions have improved. But gig companies spend millions lobbying against these reforms, claiming they would destroy the very flexibility workers signed up for. Once again, the promise of freedom becomes a weapon used to preserve corporate power. The bigger lesson is this: inequality doesn't disappear in the gig economy, it adapts. It wears the mask of innovation and disguises itself as opportunity. And unless we challenge that narrative, the future of work will look less like freedom and more like managed precarity. Because here's the truth: real flexibility isn't just the ability to log on or off. Real freedom means knowing your bills will be paid, your health is protected, and your labour has value. Until gig work offers that, the promise will remain a lie that traps the working class while selling them the dream of escape.